Hey, so I wanted to talk about the pendulum that is I am alone, or the fear of being alone. If you don't know what a pendulum is, and this is my interpretation from Vadim Zeland's reality transurfing, but you could call it whatever you want. We all understand the concept, I think, of what I'm about to say, which is a pendulum is essentially anything that you feed your energy to, and the more energy the pendulum gets, the more rapidly it swings, figuratively speaking, the more energy it takes from you. And, your thoughts are less and less in your own creative sphere and are essentially just being sucked away by this thing and giving you nothing in return. That's my definition of a personal pendulum. And then there are global pendulums like coronavirus and the riots and stuff that have been going on lately, where a lot of people are feeding their energy towards this thing, and it sort of takes on a life of its own and starts to sort of behave in a way where the individuality of the people feeding the energy to this thing sort of ceases to be relevant, and everybody sort of starts being expected to behave in a certain way towards the idea that everybody is feeding their energy to. That's the basic idea of a pendulum. And I wanted to talk about the personal pendulum that affects so many people, myself especially, which is the I am alone pendulum. This terrifying thought that being alone is essentially a fate worse than death. Not to be dramatic about it. I think a lot of us actually feel that way. I think it's why so many people spend all their lives in relationships. It's definitely why I was in one relationship or another all the way pretty much until last December, from the time I was like 15 until the time I was over 40. And even up until recently, I had a relationship with my last long-term serious boyfriend. We broke up 5 years ago, and we've still been acting in a very emotionally together way for a long time. And I think that this was kind of a final frontier for me. I've addressed a lot of other issues in my own life personally, but the fear of being alone has been one that has been ever present for as long as I can remember, and has definitely been a major player in all of my choices in my adult life. All of them have been driven in one way or another by this I am alone pendulum. And I'm still dealing with it. I just a few weeks ago, I mentioned on this channel, decided that I needed to separate from my ex to try to emotionally come to terms with this thing, this I am alone thing. Because I sense that if I can get completely comfortable with this idea, then it will free me in a way that I've never been free before. And then, this will allow me to have the mental space to actually create the rest of my life the way I want it. And so what I've been sort of trying to deal with, and what I've been trying to remember, this was a little gift that I got in December when I had my spiritual awakening. Part of what that was for me was the realization that, when I first started reading Neville, this idea of visualizing with emotion the end scene of something that you want to come about was new to me, because all the things that I have selected and brought about into my reality have been done in a different way, which I want to get to that also in a minute. But I did this. I spent time visualizing, and I was really shocked at how vividly I could feel scenes in my imagination. And it just dawned on me quickly. I think my first video on this channel is about this. I'll link to that. It dawned on me that, the experiences I was having in my imagination were just as real and valid as the experiences that I have in reality, in my 3D world. And, in sort of an instant, I had this downloaded understanding that every experience that you have in 3D is also just a form of your imagination, just using an object in 3D to facilitate the experience. And I think when you realize that, a couple things happen. One, outer experiences just will never ever provide you with the same thing that they did before. And two, and weirdly and kind of sadly in some ways, you realize that you're alone in your head all the time. Which is weird, because if you realize that you're alone in your head all the time, and every experience that you have using a 3D object to facilitate an imaginal feeling, to bring about an experience, if you realize that that's always only been you, it's sort of terrifying and liberating at the same time, because basically it's terrifying because you realize that you're completely alone. But at the same time, you've always been that way, even when you thought you weren't. And so there's sort of two ways of looking at it. You can look at the fact that you're alone. You can look back at the times where you didn't feel alone and go, oh my God, I was in fact alone that whole time, and it's terrifying. Or you can look at being alone and realize that it was never a bad thing, because it's always been this way. Basically, the times that you were alone and that felt terrifying, those were the illusions. Not when you were with someone or when you had a sense of connectedness and you didn't feel alone. Basically, it was always just you. You were creating the feeling of not being alone during those times. I think the bottom line, like where I've landed on this, is that the truth is, if it was ever okay, it's always been okay. And it's okay right now. And, I think this is a really tough one to sit and absorb, especially if you're by yourself and you don't want to be, and you're sort of in the thick of it. If this is my greatest fear in life, if this is my greatest challenge, I'll give myself a B+ for how I've been handling it. It's helpful to sort of have this perspective that, if I've ever felt connected, if I've ever not felt alone, that was the true, that was the true experience I should be experiencing even when I am alone, because, I created that. I created that feeling. If you can create that feeling, then you can create it when you're by yourself too. I don't know. That's what I've been dealing with. And it's not easy. And I know a lot of people out there are, feeling a sense of desperation about finding a mate, or I don't know, maybe for you it's finding a group of friends. This is something that people really struggle with. People make terrible relationship and friendship decisions to avoid this. And I think the bottom line is, you have to realize that when you have a connection with somebody else and you feel like you're not alone, that feeling is just being created by you using an external object. And you have the power to create that sense of not being alone when you're all by yourself, and you need to, because you will never truly share your reality with anyone else. Eventually we're all coming face to face with the reality of our own sort of singular experience of consciousness. I don't know what happens after death, obviously, but at some point, everyone, I think, has to come to terms with this. You know, you came into the world alone and you're leaving alone. And the experience that you have throughout your life is being created by you and you alone. Your interpretation of outside events, your perceptions, your emotions, your expectations, all of your beliefs create this whole experience, and that's it. It's just you and your beliefs. Nothing more. And if you can face up to this boogeyman, as I've been calling it, you know, there's nothing there in reality. There's nothing to be afraid of in reality. It's just a fear that drives you to make decisions that fuck up your whole life many times. So I wanted to talk about that. And I'm also going to link to, maybe I'll just make another video about this. I listened to a lecture, somebody posted it on my subreddit. I listened to a lecture by Bentino Massaro that I want to link to because I really love it. It's about the parallel reality stuff. I'll just link to that. It's really long, but you should listen to it because it's awesome. It kind of explains the parallel realities thing and how we're selecting everything. So I just wanted to also put a link to that. And maybe I'll make another video where I talk about that. I had some sort of big light bulb sort of moments during that I think I want to talk about. Anyway, have a great day.